Welcome to the Z Fold 3 review. So I'm just gonna go ahead and say it. I'm convinced that for the next 12 months, this is going to be my favorite phone yet. Unless some new foldable kind of comes into place that puts this one in a lower position, I don't think any phone will beat this one because I really like this phone. Now I'm going to start off by talking about what I think is the most important part of this review, and that's the idea and concept of a foldable phone in the first place, its purpose and where it fits in and whether it's worth it and that kind of thing. So, firstly, we call it a folding phone, but in reality, I think it's more like a folding computer because it takes up the functionality of all three: a laptop, a tablet, and a phone. For the average consumer. Now, I understand that for some people, it won't take up the role of a laptop. For me, for example, it doesn't take up the role of a computer because I need a strong, powerful computer that works with professional editing software that can handle very high resolution videos, that kind of thing. I can't use this as a computer replacement, but for the average consumer, they may be able to do that. Maybe that's you, maybe it isn't. But think about it from the perspective of someone who just writes and sends emails and writes and sends Word documents and edits PowerPoints and that kind of thing. This is their all-in-one device that is capable of doing all of these things while fitting in their pocket. It's on another level. You get some sort of detachable pocket-sized keyboard as well that fits with this, then you have a whole setup. You have a monitor at your desk at work, connected with one cable. Run Dex, you have a desktop interface on a large screen from a device that is pocketable. See what I'm saying here about this device being an all-in-one and the potential it has, especially with the S Pen and all of that, which is another thing that we're going to get into. But for me, I think this device is on an entirely different level. Now let's talk about everything one by one. So firstly, the most important part of a phone, in my opinion, on the front you're getting a 6.2 inch 2K 120Hz AMOLED display with an incredibly thin aspect ratio. Now something I gotta say about this display is the 120Hz is new, which is very, very nice. Love 120Hz. The resolution is 2K. It's fine. It's like, you don't notice anything. It's not like it's bad. And then something I have to say is this display looks much narrower in person and feels much narrower in person than it does on video. So this is just something important you should bear in mind before buying the phone, especially if you're doing it online. Now this front screen peaks at 1200 nits and overall is a very nice screen to use. Samsung are known for making very nice screens and this one is definitely no exception. And especially towards the end, after the excitement of having that inner foldable display, after that excitement kind of faded, I found myself using the cover display quite a bit more just because it was more accessible and it's easier to use with one hand. Like you kind of got to sit down and focus and be invested in the use of your phone when you're using that inner display. So it's good to have this one, but I did find myself using it more, which is just something interesting that I wanted to share. But something about this phone in terms of both displays is neither one is perfectly suited for social media. We'll get into the inner display in a minute, but the reason this display isn't suited for social media isn't necessarily because it's narrow. Like generally it's quite fine, it doesn't really make a difference, except for things can be quite small like photos on Instagram, which actually is a bit of a problem. But mainly because when it comes to texting over social media, you have this incredibly small, narrow, fiddly keyboard and you're going to make a lot of typing mistakes, a lot, and it's not fun at all. So that's one thing that's a bit annoying. There's no sweet spot. The cover display is a bit too narrow and the inner display is a bit too wide. Now for the inner display, it basically has the same specs. Obviously it's bigger, it's a 7.6 inch screen, 2K 120Hz AMOLED with a peak brightness of 1200 nits. Foldable display, obviously selling point here, and it has S Pen support, so that's a big difference there. Like any Samsung display, it's a great display, but let's get to the interesting parts. So this screen happens to fold. It's made of mainly plastic with apparently an ultra thin layer of glass on top to kind of add a premium feel to it, which I'm not gonna lie, it's there, like it doesn't feel like plastic, but most of you are gonna rock the screen protector anyway, which kind of coats that entire thing anyway, so it doesn't really make a difference to you. In terms of the crease, it's many people's main concern. When using the phone, you can't see the crease. If you look at the phone from an angle, you can see the crease. Unless you're in direct sunlight, then even when you're using the phone, you can see it. But at the end of the day, it's not a deal breaker whatsoever. And the other thing is, in terms of feeling the crease, do you feel the crease? Not really, because it's right in the center of a very large display. Your finger rarely passes through the center, so you don't come to feeling it that often. But when you do as well, like, it's fine. It doesn't really matter. This shouldn't be a determining factor on whether you're going to get this phone or not. But it would still be nice to see companies try and hide the crease even more as folding phones progress with time. Now, another feature with this display that I am personally a very, very big fan of, that I actually wasn't a big fan of when I first saw it online before I actually got the phone in person, is the invisible punch hole cutout. I'm a very big fan of this. I love it. Now, the reality is it's far from perfect, because if you know it's there, you can see it. It's very pixelated, but at the end of the day, it is much better than a black cutout, because a black cutout kind of just sticks out. But this, if you're not looking for it, you don't see it. It just blends in with the rest of the phone. And it just looks much, much nicer. And it takes you a step closer to that edge-to-edge display that we've been wanting to get on phones. And also, to kind of prove my point even more, I showed this phone to several people, and I asked them to look for the selfie camera. They spent probably around like 20 seconds each looking for the camera, and in the end they couldn't find it because they didn't know it was there. And it's not that easy to find because it blends in very well. So overall, I give this a thumbs up. This is also something I want to see improve with future generations, because it still does have a lot of room for improvement, but it's looking really, really good, and I would have loved to see it on the cover display as well. Now, another nice little benefit that you get with a foldable display that's this big, and I mean, you could argue that it is a little bit of a gimmick, but the benefit you're getting here is that it self-mounts. If you want to take a picture or a video, probably a video, then it's its own tripod. Or if you want to kind of mount up your phone to watch a video, a YouTube video, you can do that. I mean, the video does get very, very small because it splits in half, but it works. So whether you think that's a nice feature, I think it has potential to be a very, very good feature if more apps take advantage of it. And that leads on to my other point about not enough app developers optimizing and taking advantage of foldable phones and optimizing their apps to work specifically on foldable phones and giving them additional features that just give it much more use on a foldable phone. There's not enough of that. Now, there have been quite a few improvements from last year, but it's still not perfect. An example of an improvement in terms of software optimization is Google Photos, for example. You can tell this was specifically designed for this phone. Or some of the stock Samsung apps like Messages and all of that stuff. They look very nice on this phone. Emails, Gmail as well. They all take advantage of this foldable display. Let's look at Instagram, for example. Firstly, Instagram doesn't even cover that aspect ratio. Now, there is a lap features which you can adjust it, and when you do it, it does look quite a bit better, but it still looks really odd. And just imagine if Instagram had made a specialized version for this tablet-like, square-like aspect ratio, which allowed you to do more on Instagram than just scroll at once. It allowed you to kind of make use of this power phone. That would have been very nice. And I feel like we are going to be getting there, but we're not quite there yet. And that's just something that I have to say, because the software is your entire experience on this phone. But then again, I do have to put extra emphasis on the fact that this is still heavily refined, especially in comparison to last year. Samsung One UI has made it look much, much better, and many third-party apps have made more optimized versions for the Fold. My point is that there's still a lot that haven't, but there is also a lot that have. So you're kind of, if you're getting the Fold now, you're kind of gonna find yourself in the balance of some things work very well, some things don't. So that's something you gotta prepare for. But the UI itself is very nice on here, especially when you're using the S Pen. And then one more thing when it comes to the software is, when it comes to typing on that inner display, if you're doing it one-handed, then forget it. But if you're doing it two-handed, it does split the keyboard in half, so it takes a little bit of getting used to, but it honestly is not a problem at all. It's absolutely fine. And you can swipe type as well on both the cover and the inner display, and it works decently well on both. But because of the split keyboard, swipe typing can be a bit odd sometimes on that inner display. Now, the final thing with the software is the multitasking, and it is very, very, very nice. You can, on the screen, have a lot of apps at once. You can have 3 apps with a dedicated space on the screen, and then you can open more apps on top in the form of windows. And then you can kind of just pin them off to the side if you want to, or swap around the apps, or, you know, just drag things around. Maybe you're searching through your emails while doing a quick Google search and taking down some notes, and then you have your calculator app up as a window in case you need to make some quick calculations. It's very, very nice, and then you can just throw things off to the side. It's a very nice experience, especially once you're using the S Pen as well. And overall, it becomes a power station. And that's why this phone is so beautiful to me, because it's this tiny thing that's in your pocket that opens up to be a productivity machine, and it just takes phones to an entirely new level. And then in terms of the build, I've said it before and I'll say it again, excluding the fact that it folds, anyone who feels it will feel a very expensive phone, and I'll tell you, it feels like an expensive phone. It also looks like an expensive phone. That matte black color really, really looks just stunning. In terms of the hinge, if you want to come feeling that, it's very sturdy, very expensive feeling, and you can tell that a lot of manufacturing and design and effort has kind of gone into that hinge. When it comes to opening it and closing it, I'm not gonna lie, opening it with one hand is not easy. It can be done, especially if you press the phone against yourself to kind of click it all the way open, but it's more of a two-handed process. But closing it with one hand is very easy. And then also on the side of the phone, in terms of biometrics, you're getting a fingerprint and the power button, which works very well. It's very smooth when you come to just click it to open the phone. I love that. But when you come to pick up the phone with your left hand, it can be a bit odd. And then finally about the build, something that impressed me about the phone that I didn't expect is they managed to get an IPX8 water resistance rating. What does this mean? You are probably more familiar with the IP68 water and dust resistance rating. Now, the difference between the two, well, the 6 in IP68 represents the dust, and the 8 represents the water resistance. In this case, the 6 is replaced with an X, basically meaning the dust resistance is untested because it is not dust resistant. But the 8 remains the same, meaning, you know, you could submerge this in water, as I have, and it works out very, very good. I'm not sure what the exact ratings are, but in rain, it's fine. If you drop it in a pool, it's fine. If you use it in a bathtub, it's fine. Like, it's the same as any other phone in the industry. It has that industry standard. Now, the reason they were able to do that is because even though water can still enter the phone from the hinge, the internal components are protected from the water. But with dust, when dust enters the phone from the hinge, it will just mess with the phone because it's a solid particle that takes up space, and eventually enough particles, especially if it's something like sand, will just damage it. I don't think it's that hard for you to imagine. Meaning taking this phone to the beach is very risky, which is one of the few things that makes it really difficult for me to recommend this phone to someone. So that's something that you should definitely keep in mind. Now, in terms of the battery, this phone has a 4400 mAh battery, which in a normal phone is pretty good, but considering that this phone has 5 cameras and one 7.6 inch 120Hz display and another 6.2 inch 120Hz display, it's not the best. I mean, the battery is definitely one of the compromises here, which is something we want to see improvements in. So in terms of my screen time, in terms of what I was getting with my usage, I was getting about 5 to 6 hours of screen on time, which wasn't too bad. It wasn't bad at all. It's nothing incredible, by no means amazing, but considering the several cameras and displays that this battery needs to power, it's pretty decent. Now, a highly requested feature, and rightfully so for this phone, was the S Pen. And I think it's very, very good that they added this, because it proves my point even more about this phone being an all-in-one, and it adds this entire new level of functionality to this phone. In terms of the S Pen itself, if you don't know, it doesn't fit inside the phone. You have to either carry it around separately or carry it in a carrying case, and the one that comes with the phone is a bit stupid because there's a flappy part that doesn't attach to the phone. It looks a bit weird. But in terms of the pen itself, because it's big, it feels very nice. Using it, you can use it for a long time, and it's very, very comfortable. I mean, I was drawing for hours on end. It has a soft touch material to it, which is nice, and this specific Fold Edition S Pen retracts when you press too hard in the display to prevent it from damaging. But something that I think was a bit mean was this pen doesn't work with the outer display. Now, this is just something so that they can add it in a new version of the phone. So it's just kind of a business thing, but it's a bit irritating. but then again, it is a very narrow display, so you wouldn't really need it on there. But overall, in terms of the use, due to the size of the screen and the pen, it's very comfortable use, especially because the phone is the perfect size to hold with one hand and then use the pen with the other hand. But I'm waiting for the day until there is an S Pen inside the Fold and then an optional bigger one outside the Fold, because by the looks of it, this is replacing the Note series. And then finally, in terms of the cameras, we're getting 3 12 megapixel sensors, a main, a telephoto, and an ultra wide. The telephoto is 2 times and it has optical image stabilization, and so does the main. In terms of the images, we're going to skim through them now, but overall, it's not like at the top, but it's definitely above average in terms of phone cameras. In terms of portrait mode, it has good edge detection, it has nice colors. Sometimes the photos can be a bit soft, but there's definitely good dynamic range. In terms of video, the video is okay, it's decent, not very sharp, it's a bit soft, and especially that ultra wide when it comes to low light video, it's not the best. But let's scroll through the images. Now, Samsung cameras have quite good contrast, and then the main camera here it's quite a large sensor, so it has quite a bit of bokeh, a bit of background blur, and as you can see here, it's not even portrait mode, and it has the really nice blur in the background, which looks really nice. The dynamic range also looks really good, specifically in these photos here, and you also get the 2 times telephoto. It's a nice range and they are good photos. The low light though is kind of where it lacks. Here is not the brightest environment and it gets worse in darker environments, but it's still not too bad. And the main line still copes pretty well in low light, but the other two, that's where it kind of hits hard. And then if you want to digitally zoom even more, you can go up to 10 times, and this is the sort of detail you'll be getting. But overall, it's a decent camera and the shots are decent, and it's definitely not bad. And like, as long as you don't require like some amazing camera stuff on a phone, then this definitely gets the job done. To sum up the photos, like, they're good photos, there's better ones out there. It's that simple. And something you may kind of notice though, which is quite common in Samsung cameras, is a bit of over sharpening. But then a look at portrait mode, this is the edge detection, this is an idea of it, and I personally think it does pretty well. In terms of the video, you're getting 4K 60, and this is kind of what it looks like. The low light isn't the best, the video on this phone isn't incredible, but it's, you know, it's not terrible. But if you're taking videos with the telephoto, that's really not that good, I'm not gonna lie. The main is pretty average, and then the ultra wide is pretty average, but low light is a big sector in which it kind of takes a big hit with the videos on this phone. And then there's something called super steady mode, which makes it like really steady stabilization, but it maxes out at 1080p, so the quality doesn't look great, but the steadiness is really good. Basically, to conclude, I really like this phone, if you can tell already, because I've been speaking pretty highly of it, because it does more than what a phone does, and it offers so much. It is £1,600, but that, in my opinion, is actually pretty fair considering what it offers. And it's much better than the 2000. This is more realistic because it's relatively close to like the iPhone 12 Pro or iPhone 13 Pro Max now, and offers a lot more because, well, A, it's 100% a phone, B, it's 100% an efficient tablet replacement, including the S Pen, and for the average consumer, it's a desktop computer replacement because it has DeX and it does what you need in a computer. So that's my conclusion for this phone. Take it for what you will. Anyway, I really hope you guys enjoyed the video. Please subscribe if you haven't already, and give this video a like and comment for the sake of their algorithm. Check out my Instagram at TheRawMailNagar for a behind the scenes perspective, and to see more about what I'm doing, because I'm posting some videos on the Flip soon and the new iPhone 13, so stay tuned for that. But yeah, I really hope you guys enjoyed the video. Thank you for watching, and I will see you in the next one. Salam.